public. Thank you. I'll remind members of your ongoing obligation to declare interest, switch off mobile, and if you want, turn your tablet to mute. Okay, today's business overview. We're going to have departmental briefing on the budget. We're going to have consideration of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill and briefing on waste gasification by Full Circle Power. So item 1, members, is on the budget, and if I can welcome Leo O'Reilly, Permanent Secretary, Ian Main, Deputy Secretary, Planning and Policy, Anthony Carlton, Director of Finance and Business Planning Division, and also Siobhan Lynn, Finance and Business Planning Division. Have we got paper?
Yes, table page 2.
Members, you have tabled paper page 2 from the department. Okay.
No, keep turn over. The next page is
From page 2? Okay. Okay. Right. Pity we didn't get this earlier. Okay, well, you're all very welcome, Leo, obviously, with debate next week and the following week, and we would be very keen to get as much information as possible about the budget. We all know the department is facing huge challenges with the cuts, with the proposed cuts, and I've been getting emails from people as well in the voluntary sector about what are the cuts. So over to you if you can give us a briefing on this, and I'm sure members will have questions to ask you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'll just give a brief overview because I know members will want to ask questions. Just on the timing of the paper, we had originally been working to a schedule of next Thursday, but we heard on Monday that the committee wanted to consider it today, so that was why the paper was a little bit later than we would have wanted coming through. Just on the, on the content of the paper, we were last here on the 27th of November and took you through the committee through the draft budget position and our analysis of it, and then, as you know, we subsequently published the draft consultation consultation document, in the draft budget, and that was obviously considered during the consultation period as part of the overall consultation on the main budget. The situation between then and now, in a sense, hasn't really changed very much, because the only the key additional allocation that was made to the department in the final budget was 1.9 million in respect of derating grant. So that's taken account of in this paper. And indeed, I'll just come back to the overall grants position with regard to local government in a second. But apart from that, the underlying position in terms of available resources and hence the nature of the challenges we face haven't really changed that much. So the paper you have today, to some extent, the first part of it in a sense repeats much of the information that was in the previous paper provided to the committee on the 27th of November, but it has been updated just to take account of the detailed figure work for the department in the final budget. If I very quickly run through the headline points here, and then, as I say, we can come back to points of detail as necessary afterwards. The final budget outcome, we highlight there the headline figure reduction of 10.7%, 12.4 million. However, table 1 on the bottom of the first page just explains how we got to the end figure, as it were, 104.2. Where you had this mechanism where there was an overall reduction across the department, not just this department, every department's at the start of the budget process. So a block of money taken out and then money added back in again for various purposes. So that's shown there, the allocations, 2.7 and 2 at draft budget stage, and then the final 1.9 at final budget stage, which gives you the opening position of 105.6. Then as we discussed previously, we transferred out 6.8 million, which was the balance of funding going to local government for the planning function. Local government, of course, in addition to that, get the access to the planning receipts. Then we have the transfer functions grant, which is the adjustment made by DFP in respect of all other services transferring to local government. So the money was taken out from all departments, put into a pot. Various adjustments were made by DFP, and the resultant figure coming back to us to allocate to local governments 4.5 million. There was a small adjustment in respect of EU funding, which then brings you to the 104.2, which is basically our starting point. There's also a mention there in Table 3 of some what we refer to as ring-fence resource DEL, which is a technical adjustment primarily in respect of depreciation. Thank you. Briefly, capital positions discussed then at the bottom of page 2, where the allocation of 7.5 conventional capital and how we propose to allocate that is shown on Table 4. There's a reference also to the financial transactions capital funding, which is in respect of the ARC21 waste facility project being promoted by ARC21 and its constituent councils. So that's the capital position. Then we move on just to highlight, of course, the department also receives income for the various fees, services we provide, and those are shown in Table 5, amounting, we estimate, again, these are always estimates because obviously you have to wait until you actually get the income, but we're forecasting 27.2 million of receipt income. And then, of course, we show the net carrier bag receipts there as well as 4.2, which then gives you, in a sense, a gross opening position of, how much money do we have to spend, which brings you to the figure on Table 6 of 131.1. We then highlighted what we refer to as necessary expenditure, which is a more detailed table at Table 7 on page 5 of the paper, which is an exercise we started. We shared the previous analysis with the committee in November, and what we've shown there are areas of spend which we think that at least in the short term, and by the short term we mean over the course of a financial year, we probably have to, in a sense, meet these costs because there are a variety of things that we think are inescapable, at least in the short term. Obviously, the single biggest item is salaries, and then there's a whole range of miscellaneous, relatively small items in their own right that we've detailed there in terms of what we forecast we will need to spend on those services over the coming year. And we've also included in the right-hand column there a comparison with what we're forecasting to spend on those services in the current year, so the committee can see where we're going to with those various services. And that brings you then to a figure of 125.5. The next section of the paper then just discusses the position on the three main grants to local government, which are D-rating, rate support, and then the new transferred functions grant. On D-rating, the position is we have the D-rating and rate support grant were reduced as part of the overall opening reduction in the department's budget. Those grants were included in that calculation of the 15.1%. The effect of that, however, is, but particularly with D-rating, as I think we've exchanged with the committee before, the point is that because it's a statutory grant and the amount to be paid is determined by a statutory formula, we can't in fact reduce it. So even though our allocation from DFP for a grant that's fixed was cut, we have to restore the balance, as it were, because it's a statutory grant, and that money then has to come out of elsewhere in our budget, which has the effect of actually increasing the actual gross cut to other parts of the budget as a result of having to meet that requirement. So what we have done, as you'll see there, have restored the D-rating grant to its previous baseline position, which was 25.8 million. However, just at the end of that first section, I do highlight the point that we estimate, in fact, that there is still an in-year shortfall of funding required for that grant of approximately £3 million. The reason that's approximate is it can't actually be finally determined until all the councils have set their rates, and then the very detailed calculations can be done to work out exactly how much D-rating grant is due to each council. And you'll notice that in bottom of Table 7 that even though the baseline for this year is 25.8, we estimate the actual spend of D-rating grant this year will be 27.3. So you can really see there's a gap there opening up. So that's an additional pressure that we will have to manage in year. But we've simply, in a sense, noted it for the moment, but haven't attempted to address it at the moment out of our current allocations. Rate support grant, similarly, baseline provision was reduced 15.1%, down from 18.3 to 15.5 million. And we've had to stick with that 15.5 million in our final allocations of rate support grant to those councils that benefit from it, and that's now been confirmed to the local government sector. It was discussed at a meeting of the partnership panel yesterday. Yes, yesterday. Thanks. The transferred function grant then is new. It's the new grant, which, as I say, the net figure that's come out of the machine from DFP is 4.5 million. It's if you members wish to, we can get into some more of the detail, but basically it's a process of bringing in all the various sums that have been allocated by departments for functions transferring, then netting off from that anticipated revenues particularly from off-street car parking, and then gives you the net figure of grant to be paid this year to local government, which is 4.5 million. So after you take account of all those, you have, starting in Par 11, what we've entitled there remaining budget, and in a sense that's really where the crunch point comes for the department, in a sense, because up until now, we've explained what we're doing, and those are the decisions that the Minister has already taken, and because particularly of the position for local government. But we get then to the remaining budget point, which is highlighted at page 7, top of page 8, where what we've shown there at table 10 is a whole range of things we spend money on at the moment, and we've shown for the committee's benefit what we estimate we'll spend on those functions this year. Okay, and you'll see that the residual spending there this year on those activities comes to roughly £9.7 million. But from you look at our analysis of our position, we just have £1.4 million left to allocate, and in essence, that's what the Minister is still working through. He hasn't reached a final view on exactly how he's going to manage this position, which you can imagine is quite difficult, because while buried within that 9.7, for example, there's spending this year on road safety of 1.9, education materials 0.3. So you have a whole range of things that we're spending money on this year, but actually very little money left at the moment to pay for the functions. We've also then, there is of course also the carrier bag levy money left to be allocated next year. We estimate that the amount will probably be roughly the same as this year, roughly 4.2 million. We've again listed for the committee's benefit the main categories into which that funding has been allocated this year, and again the Minister is looking at how exactly he will distribute that funding amongst those and any other categories next year. There's just a summary of what those main categories are. I suppose just to finish up quickly, the conclusions are set out in I suppose the section at the end, page 10, on where we are. It's basically the core problem boils down to the figures quoted at the latter part of the paper, namely, the projected spend this year on a range of services for which there's currently very little money left to spend next year. In terms of the way we're seeking to manage this at the moment, along in discussion with the Minister, is to look at what we've got, namely the 1.4, and then also looking at the fact that we have carrier bag levy money available to allocate as well. And what we're seeking to do is at least to shave off the worst effects of this position by prioritising and managing the carrier bag levy money very carefully. However, we are of course restricting what we can use carrier bag levy money for, because it has to be allocated to environmental and community programmes. It can't be used for anything. There's a restriction on how we can use that money. So therefore that also means we have to be very careful as to how exactly then we use the balance of 1.4 of remaining resource style to be used. And I mean, the Minister's agreed that, he did say that he wanted me to alert the committee of the fact he is very conscious of the position in road safety, and certainly he will want to ensure that there's at least some allocation in that area to allow the basic work we're doing in respect of road safety to continue next year. But he hasn't, as I say, reached final decisions. But when we do, and we expect that to happen within the next week or so, given the proximity to the start of the new financial year, then of course we'll the committee with a final outcome. Just a final point, we note there at the end, is that of course our ambition this year is to remove quite a lot of staff from the department if we possibly can. However, we don't know, we can't be certain as to exactly how many will go because, as we discussed in November, it's a voluntary scheme, so therefore we have to wait and see who puts their hands up to go. And it's a civil service-wide scheme, so we have to plug into the whole larger mechanism that will be put in place to manage this. So it's still uncertain as to how many staff will go, and we've been told that it's unlikely that staff will start leaving the department until, or anywhere in the civil service, until about September onwards, so the second half of the financial year. But once that starts to happen, then there will be a bit further easement on our position because we'll no longer have to pay those salaries. But until that happens, we don't feel we can allocate money, specific money, to groups to spend because we're not certain yet whether we will have the money to allocate. But it does mean that in the second part of the year we can hopefully, attempt to manage some of the worst effects of the position as and when the staff start to leave the department and begin to make savings through that process. I think that's a quick run through where we are at the moment, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Leo. That's a quick run through. I'm not sure how much I have taken it all in. So where are the areas that are going to see the most severe cuts, ones with the greatest casualties?
I suppose the best place to go for that is actually table 10, page 8 of the paper.
Okay.
That's the main area, to answer your question, Chair. Those are the main areas. Because those are the areas where we currently spend money. Okay.
So is this year? This is 20.
Yeah.
You're talking 2014-15.
Yeah, and the figures shown there are the amounts we will spend this year against all those various activities. Okay. Those are millions. So 0.2 is 200,000. 0.5 is 500,000. Those are the spend levels at the moment, and then at the bottom of that table, as you can see on page 9, we can show that those total this year to 9.73 million. But our prior analysis in the paper show that at the moment we're estimating to have just 1.4 million available to allocate to those areas. But as I've already said, we also then have the carrier bag levy money to allocate of approximately 4.2 million. So what we're doing at the moment with the Minister is a sort of grid type exercise to try to both cope with the very limited amounts of money available in DEL, in terms of resource DEL, and look at what we should use that for. And again, Minister's asked me to tell the committee that he is very conscious of the position in road safety, and then also look at what we can use our balance of carrier bag levy money for, where the particular funding stream qualifies for funding from that source. So, in a sense, to answer your question, it's table 10 are the main areas of pressure.
Okay. So most of those seem to be with NGOs. They are going to be the ones that would suffer the most, and that's through the grants, programs, and all that.
Yeah. It's well, you can see the main groups. So there's obviously a residual. There's a range of grants, which are much smaller grants, which are paid to councils for various activities at the moment, and they're listed there at the top. And then you have, as you say, a range of NGOs. You have the advertising spend in the middle, which is, the road safety advertising and other materials, which is quite a large chunk in the middle. And then you have a range of contracted out services, which are basically, they're not grants, they're services that we buy from external providers. And you can see those range across, in some respects, other government departments. Sometimes it's academic institutions, University of Ulster, and sometimes then it's private sector contractors. So that's the other main category that are in there.
So are many of those under any legal obligations that you have to continue? No, you can just say we don't want the contract to go on.
It's obviously not the ideal situation. We have written out just just after Christmas, to all these bodies and all associated bodies, just alerting them to the fact of the very challenging position the department was facing, so that we were at least giving them advance notice formally that they could not assume that they would continue to receive either grant funding next year from us, or alternatively that we would continue to buy their services under existing contracts. It was just to ensure that they got advance notice of that before we got to the point where we're at now in terms of reaching final decisions. But it does mean, the fact is that at the start of the year, a large number of these bodies and groups will not be able to say that we're allocating them funding next year. The best we can say is that as the year progresses, as we continue to look at our other costs, as we hopefully in the second part of the year, as staff start to leave, that'll free up some more money, and hopefully we'll be able to make some use of that to ease some of the worst effects of the organisations and bodies that are affected, as listed in Table 10.
Okay. Last time when you talked to us, you mentioned that you would be looking for 1/3 of the staff going in order to balance the book. Are you still in the same position?
Yeah. Well, I mean, where that you can just, if you back normal copy, if you looked at where our estimate of that was based on the assumption of saying what would we need to do to get back to where we are now in terms of our external funding programmes. So you have approximately £10 million that we spend at the moment across those areas. We've highlighted the fact that at the beginning there's another £3 million we think will still have to go to derating grant in the course of the year. We will, as always, go to DFP and the executive, but we will hopefully have some success here, but I can't assume, I can't plan to spend money on the assumption that I hope I might get something from someone. I have to plan on the basis of what I know I have. So hence, you have at least a £13 billion potential problem in the department, and hence the forecasts of how many staff we would need to lose to address that problem. However, in practice, as I said at the beginning, we don't know yet how many staff will leave. We simply don't know until the scheme is due to launch on the 2nd of March. I think expressions of interest are due to be back at the end of April. So it'll be around about that time a picture will begin to emerge of what's likely to happen in terms of downsizing the department. And I mean, as far as we're concerned, we will want that to happen as quickly as possible, but we have to move at the same pace as the scheme across the service as a whole.
Okay. The 1/3 cut of staff is really based on cost.
Yeah.
It's not based on whether your department can function and what posts
cost.
these could, be.
Yeah, it's cost.
It's a crazy way to do things for any government department.
Well, absolutely. You have to plan to operate. I mean, at the end of the day, difficult decisions have been made. You've got an allocation. You have to now plan to operate as effectively as you can within it.
And can you say there are essential posts that people cannot take voluntary redundancy, or any restructuring of the department? Well, I suppose by 2016 there will be massive restructuring.
We're all departments are just looking at that specific point at the moment. If I can ask the committee's forbearance, because final decisions, because it's a cross-cutting stream across the civil service, there's things about negotiations, discussions with trade unions, etc. But I can tell you that the target date for final decisions on any exceptions is currently Friday the 13th of February. So after that date, we will definitely be able to tell the committee and everyone else as to whether or not there are any specific posts to be accepted from that particular voluntary exit scheme.
Okay. Members may want you to come back next week. Is it possible to come back again next week? Just give us a brief, a summary of what your final decisions maybe?
It would be, the ideal would be, when the final decisions are made, then it will be a factual position I'm able to present to the committee.
Yeah.
As
it's
I say,
just scary.
We were working with the Minister, but I wouldn't, it would be unfortunate if I came back and it was, we're still looking at this story, which wouldn't be very satisfactory for you or your members.
Okay.
But I'll check when I go back obviously this is very difficult for the minister, you know,
Yeah.
because he's obviously being pulled in lots and lots of directions.
No. Yeah. Okay. Other members who have a whole list of members
Yeah.
wanting to ask you questions. Colin first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Leo. I think no matter how you slice this, table
Yeah.
10, you're going to be looking at serious cuts for people. I'll come back to the councils in a minute, but one that jumps out there is Explorers,
Yeah.
Community Places, Community Transport Association, Disability Action, with 2.2 million for road safety, listed buildings, city waste clean-up.
Yep.
You know, lots of things around environmental crime.
Yeah.
You're going to find it very difficult to actually prioritise what you actually cut.
Yeah.
And I think people need to understand the impact this is going to have on a lot of those small organisations. But can I ask you, in terms of the council stuff, I suppose we all promised people that the councils would have, and the new changes around councils would be cost neutral. That we would begin into a new period where councillors would have more powers and a bit more democratic, and it wouldn't cost the public a fortune. And then we see that we're cutting the rate support grant in places like my constituency, where they're struggling enough to raise rates. What is the projected impact in places like Derry or Strabane on the rates because of this? You know, the likelihood is it's either going to be higher rates or fewer services. Have you any notion around how that's going to work itself out?
Maybe I could ask Ian, do you have the figures for what the rate support grants actually turn out as for the different council areas?
I don't have them with me, but we can share them with the committee. We can get them to the committee this afternoon.
Yeah.
All of the councils who receive rate support grants within the new 11 council structure have been notified, and were notified yesterday of the precise amounts that they received. The impact on the rates and the impact on services will be determined by the councils themselves. They will make choices as part of their budgeting process, which they're engaged in at the moment, and in striking their rates as to how they will deal with those and other pressures that they're faced with.
But if you're cutting, I don't know, you haven't given us the exact figures, but if you're cutting however much off their
15%.
their budget, it's Hobson's choice, really. You know, it's either cut rates or increase rates or cut services. There's no, there's no real third way there.
There is also the opportunity for those councils to use or dip into potentially the reserves they hold, and the reserves that are being carried forward from the 26 councils to the new 11 councils. So that adds to the mix, but there's no doubt that it does cause additional difficulties, and difficulties that the government would have preferred to avoid. But the position is what the position is. It's where we are at the moment. We've tried to work through the process as quickly as possible to provide certainty to the councils on the figures, not only in relation to the rate support grant, but also position on the D-rating grant and the other smaller grants that they receive. But the key ones are the D-rating grant, the rate support grant, and the transferred functions grant. And we've been working very closely with the new chief executives and finance officers in the councils to help them get the grips with those issues. But it's not possible for the department to give you an indication as to what the potential impact might be, because that will very much depend on local choices by those individual councils and how they balance their budget as they move forward.
Yeah. Just in terms of the specific areas you mentioned, I'm looking here at a recent answer to an Assembly question from John McAllister, MLA, where he asked, it was very valuable information, because he asked for a breakdown of what percentage of total council budgets do these two grants, D-rating grant and rate support grant, account for. So there's a detailed table there. I mean, I know that with the combined councils, the answer will be different, obviously, but at the moment, rate support grant during 13-14 accounted for 2% of Derry City Council total budget, but it accounted for 13% of Strabane's total budget. So therefore, so what you're saying is it's 2% of their budget at the moment, and then a proportion of whatever they get to make up that 2%. So the net effect of the reduction will be some relatively small portion of 2%, and in the case of Strabane, it'll be a small portion of 13%, but it will be still a few percentage points.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
But the effect could be quite, quite substantial. The poorer councils may then, have great difficulties balancing their books.
Chair, I think the answer will emerge quite quickly because, as you know, all of the councils have to strike their rate for the coming year by February the 15th. So they're all in the final stages now of working through
Yeah.
their budgetary issues. So I think we
Yeah.
will know what those impacts are likely to be fairly soon.
Yeah. You see, Ian, you said they can dip into the reserve. You can
Yes.
only dip into your reserve once. I mean, you can't continue to dip into your reserve
No,
every
it-
year if this is going to happen
You're
every
absolutely
year.
right, Chair, but it is a potential source of income that they could use if they choose to do so. It's part of the overall mix equally, to deal with some of the pressures and to make provision for longer-term delivery of programmes, particularly capital programmes. They can also make use of both their prudential borrowing powers and also the borrowing powers from the National Loans Fund. So it's that total mix that they're
Okay.
getting to grips with at the moment.
Okay. Sandra?
Thank you very much, Chair, for coming this morning. It's hard to get through this detail, only reading it as we're here this morning. And in relation to Table 12, it would probably be, or Table 10, it might be useful to see the comparative figures for previous year, and then you'll be able to see where the reductions are, if I'm understanding it correctly, that is.
Yeah, the figures there are what we estimate to be spent this year, okay, in the current financial year. What we will be able to do when we finalise our position is then put in another column showing actual allocations for next year, so you'll be able to contrast with what people have received this year and what we're proposing or allocating to them next year.
That would be good.
So there's a further column to go in.
But, I mean, what you're saying is really, for this year, 9.73 million will only be met by 1.4 million next year. That's
Yeah,
what
just
you're saying,
qualify that
right?
slightly by saying also, yes. Simple answer, yes.
So that's really 90% cut you're talking of, roughly,
Yeah.
on that, yeah.
Okay, we just wanted to ask you about the staff reductions again. You're driven to make staff reductions because of cost,
Yeah,
and you're waiting to see how many decide to take redundancy
yeah,
so that you know how much they cost.
yeah.
So then you can decide how much then are you, I mean, if you're driven by cost, then you need to compare the figure that you're saving through voluntary redundancies by the amount that you want to save. So you may want to make more on voluntary redundancies to make up that amount because
Yeah.
you're focusing on an amount that you want to save through staff.
Yeah, you could get to that position, but given our financial situation, I don't think that will be our problem. I suspect the problem will be that perhaps not as many staff wish to leave as perhaps we would like to balance our financial position. I mean, a good ballpark figure is to say that if 100 staff leave, say from September onwards, over the year, that will produce a saving of 1.5 from September onwards, because it's half a year, so it's likely it's equivalent of 50 staff over a full year. So for every 100 staff that leave from September onwards, we will free up approximately £1.5 million, just as a sort of ballpark figure to work with.
Doesn't that up?
Yeah, it does.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, Sandra?
Okay, I think I'll leave it as that. We get more confirmed figures because
Yeah, it's
Just a follow-up question. What's the morale like for staff at the moment in the department? Must be rock bottom.
It's well, it's obviously a lot of has just come out over the last couple of weeks, indeed even over the last week or so. So I mean, even just today, when I finish here, I'll be going down to have a session for most of the rest of the day with all my senior team to go through a range of issues we have to manage, budget and other including the voluntary exit scheme. I mean, we have, both in my department and across all, made a particular effort over the last couple of months to really, try and give staff as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. So once decisions are made, we strive to get detail out to staff as quickly as possible. I think people understand. I think people understand the wider context. They understand the difficulties. They understand. I suppose people are reassured by the assurance that it's a voluntary scheme. And I think they understand that there's going to be a lot of change over the next 12 months for them and for everyone else. But I think the difference, sometimes these things can create more morale problems if people feel that a particular area is being targeted or being treated unfairly or disproportionately. But I think everyone in every department is, for various reasons, facing difficult scenarios. So I think that from my experience of doing, and the second thing I mentioned, just obviously, DOE has been through quite a lot of downsizing over the last few years. I mean, once we get through to the planning staff leaving in April, once we remove the 300 DVA staff who used to do vehicle licensing, a couple of years ago, you will recall, we also had to downsize by approximately 250 planning staff. So that's 1,000 staff will have left the department for various reasons. So the people in my department are fairly well, they become to some extent battle hardened in terms of managing downsizing.
Yeah, and then 2016, even more uncertainties about where they're going to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I suppose going back to what I want to say is, or want to ask is, you reckon you will get sufficient savings from a voluntary redundancy scheme that you won't have to make any more redundancies?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Right, very good.
But that is a massive number. You're talking 500 posts.
Yeah. But we'll have to wait and see what the actual number is. But what I have to do, however, is I have to produce, and the Minister then has to agree, a financial scenario that enables us to work within what we know we have to spend, as distinct from what we'd hope to be able to spend or like to spend.
I have heard Terry Ahern's leaving.
Yes. As you know, he's becoming Chief Executive of
Scottish
SEPA, is that it? Scottish Environment Protection Agency.
Scottish Environment Agency.
Yeah, so it's an unfortunate loss, particularly at this time.
A great loss to us.
Yeah.
Sir, can I also ask about the road safety promotion budget, and what's the reduction of that now?
Well, at the moment, sorry, as you see from Table 10 again, that the current year the advertising budget is 1.9, and then we do other things, education materials for schools, page 8.
Yep.
It's just about halfway down there. So there's two core areas of spend there. Again, I can't say precisely what we will allocate in our opening position against those items. But the Minister has told me I can't say. I mean, he will be allocating resources to those areas, but I think you can assume safely that it won't be as much as is in for this year.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I have sent in a couple of questions to the department about if there's not going to be advertising. Would the department consider using social media and other means that would not cost that much? Don't think I've received any response yet.
No, those are very. I suspect part of the reason is because people are waiting to see what their finance. But it will force us to look fundamentally at how we get across road safety messages. We've adopted a particular pattern over quite a long few years now. Question is, as you've highlighted, Chair, social media, very different channels of communications, particularly with younger people, perhaps need to pause. And this is, in a sense, an opportunity. In that sense, it will force us perhaps to look at, is the way we're spending the money the most cost-effective way in getting a message across people? Yeah.
A lot of young people don't watch television now.
Yeah.
You know, they don't have television either. You know, they use social media and to get the news and the YouTube and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chair, could I mention that social media we're already using
Okay.
on Facebook and Twitter, but it's still it's almost in its infancy in terms of our sophistication in how we use that to get messages out to that younger audience in particular, and it's something that we plan to focus more heavily on in the coming years, and certainly in the coming year that we will make more use of that. We also want to transfer our capacity to be able to deliver messages through social media away from our current contractor and into the department itself, so that we begin to deliver more of the messages on a more routine basis ourselves. So that's part of our programme for the next year, in anticipation that there will be some reduction to our use of traditional advertising methods.
Okay. Okay.
That would be good.
Yeah.
I think even our young people don't use Facebook as much as the older people do, so you really do need to be innovative, and Instagram, all sorts of different things. Final question, is the department then still committed to allocating capital spend to the ARC21 project, considering the fact that plan permission is not free for that project?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I recall we discussed this also in November. I mean, as we highlight there, this block of what's referred to as financial transactions, capital funding, is in the department's budget in relation to proposals that are being developed by the ARC21 group of councils, along with, I understand, private sector contractor, but that hasn't yet reached a conclusion, okay? And the commercial negotiations haven't reached a conclusion, as I understand it. Again, I need to stress that the department, we're not a party to those negotiations, so I can honestly say I literally don't know exactly where they're at the moment. The other half of the issue, of course, as you've highlighted as well, is the fact that there's still an issue, there's still planning approval, which is being considered a separate stream of work in the department.
Yeah.
So it's earmarked at the moment for that project, and we'll wait and see what develops over the coming months in respect of the project.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Pam?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. Just in the back of Sandra's question about the ARC21 proposal, the acoustics not great in here. I didn't clearly hear what you were saying there, but so just ask you if you could explain the process and how the transaction capital funding works, and how that allocation came to be in the budget.
Very briefly, and I qualify my comments by stressing I'm not an expert in this area, which is quite technical. Financial transaction capital funding is a tranche of funding that's been allocated in Northern Ireland, largely as a result of a Barnett consequential of similar blocks of capital funding that have been allocated by the UK government, particularly to large infrastructure projects in the South East. The critical requirement is that the money is spent to support private sector, so it can't be a public sector body, it has to be private sector activity. And for example, as I understand it, in the South East, where you've very large public sector infrastructure projects being delivered through the private sector, it was a means to ensure that access to capital problems over the last number of years could be eased through making available government-backed sources of financial capital, but it's allocated on a commercial basis. It's charged a rate of interest, but it means that in developing very large projects, private sector investors could be assured that, if necessary, they could access this capital funding stream if it turned out that their more traditional private sector banks, institutions, etc., were unable to produce the very large amounts of capital they would require to spend in developing these infrastructure projects. So in a sense, it's a tranche of money that has come to us as a result of that process, particularly in the south of England. I suppose our difficulty in absorbing the capital is that, or using it, is that we have much smaller such infrastructure projects, and there are basically a much smaller number of large infrastructure projects being developed at the present time, and I think probably you'll have seen the Finance Minister has alluded to this, particularly I've seen in the House, but also obviously in presentations to his departmental committee.
Okay, so for clarification, this has come separately
Yes, it's
from the rest of the budget, and
completely
it's
separate. Yes,
effectively a form of a
yeah.
loan fund, which could be available if it can be used for this project.
Yes, and it will ultimately the decision on whether and if it's used or indeed is required is ultimately for the private sector side of the consortium,
Yeah.
as would be the case in any other large infrastructure project.
Okay, so I'd asked you, and I'll ask you again, how did that come to be in the budget in the first place?
Simply because this was the ARC21 proposal was identified as a potential potential object, as it were, of using this available finance that's available to Northern Ireland. There are, as I said, a limited number of very large scale infrastructure projects available that provide an opportunity where these types of funding streams can be used. So it was identified as a potential, and I underline a potential use to be made of this money.
Okay, so I get that. So to be clear, this was then included in the budget at the request of DOE to DFP.
Well, I wouldn't say it was the request of DOE because we weren't, as I stressed, we're not a party to this procurement, and we have to be careful because for commercial reasons we're not a party to the procurement.
Yes. Okay, but it was identified by
but it emerged.
DOE
It emerged.
Potential.
Yeah, it emerged
this
through,
fund.
as I understand it, engagement between ARC21 officials and the Strategic Investment Board, who were tasked with seeking to find opportunities to use this type of funding. So it was then identified, and then once it's identified as a potential source, the capital the funding which is initially held centrally by DFP has to be allocated out into relevant departmental budgets. So that's the process. Once the decision was made that this was a potential source of, using the word source is not the right word, the potential use of this capital, then the money had to be allocated out to the relevant department, and in this case, because of the nature of the project, our department was the relevant department.
And what happens to that amount if ARC21 are unsuccessful and unable to use it?
Well, it won't be. Maybe state the obvious, it won't be used for that project. So therefore, another project would have to be identified. Whether
the department from this department?
Not
not
necessarily.
necessarily. No, it could be any
So it
department.
would go back to
Yeah,
where it came
yeah,
from.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. Thank
But-
you. And
Pam, I think the Minister assured us, identifying Act 21 of a possible, organisation of getting that money doesn't mean that, they will have,
Yeah.
there will be any bearing
Yes.
on planning approval being given.
no,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly hope so,
Yes.
Chair.
Yeah.
I just want to ask on the road safety advertising, and again, Sandra I should read my mind today. Should raise that. I know myself, and I think Paul Cahill as well, have raised questions about how effective some of very, very expensive spend in advertising and TV especially for these road safety adverts. And I know there are a lot of people out there, families of victims of road traffic accidents and stuff, who are actually distressed by having these ads continue, and I understand the Minister and the stats and whatnot that have been given to us to say that these are effective and we're doing the right thing. But given the financial constraints, I would like to think that the department will look very seriously at how better they could get the message across, and if it's young people in particular that we are targeting, I'd agree absolutely about social media and different ways that we can look at how
Yeah.
how we can get the message across to young people. And I would suggest, and I'm not sure which department it came under, but road safety road shows, which I attended one 2010, I think it was, at a local school, very much aimed at bringing schools together, and incredible the experience I had at that road safety road show and that type of thing. They were not able to, every child of the appropriate age was not able to access that, and I think that's something actually that probably wouldn't cost anything like what the TV advertising costs, something that may actually be more effective, bring it right down to the ground, the issue that this is actually real, you know, where you have people testifying, people in wheelchairs testifying to what happened to them and how that came about, and the effect it was really incredible. And I think that we could be using that money better, and of course probably won't be that money to spend anyway, so you're going to have to look at different ways of doing it. And I agree totally as well with the chair when we talk about TV and how that's accessed and used today. And I mean, I don't watch live TV, so I would never see an advertisement, because if it's something I watch, it's recorded and watched at a later date. You don't watch that, you just skip on through it. So I think there are different ways and different methods which cost nothing or little. And I would also suggest look at it, you know, things such as Spotify, different forms of music that are accessed through the internet too, that are very, very widely used, and may well be more effective and may actually get to your target audience in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, this is, once we know what we are spending in this area, certainly at Sains people do this. I mean, we will certainly be launching an immediate review of how we're doing this, what sort of methods we're using. I mean, the last time we were here, I highlighted, as we all know, the unfortunate fact that a very high proportion of fatalities on the road are young men driving on country roads. So, for example, there was an initiative a couple of years ago where jointly between the Ulster Farmers Union and the GAA got together, because of organisations that do work in the large, strong presence in the countryside, and joint programmes and joint road shows concerning, you know, to get the message across to young people in rural areas about the dangers of driving on country roads.
The question is, would you have staff to do all that? Going out, joining with GAA and UFU to do all these things?
Well, certainly, at least until September, we will have a staff. So, no, and that is actually quite a significant point, because as the way we both the amount of money we're spending reduces, but also what we're spending it on changes significantly. So that means that our staff have to work differently, and certainly initially we will be looking at using people to look at alternative ways of delivering with a more limited budget, and still trying to be as effective as possible.
Sure.
Money doesn't always equate with effectiveness.
No,
more money.
No. I know. In a way, it's a kind of lazy way almost. So, you know, you just put out television adverts and that's it. Yeah. Okay, Cal?
Thanks, Chair. I don't know if there's any questions left to ask, and I'll try and come up with some. And I do support that in relation to the safety, because I've mentioned it before, in light of the rise in road fatalities last year, that was the way to go. Now, I do support a budget for road safety, don't get me wrong, but I think we need to be more creative in how we do that. And I certainly have to congratulate the likes of the GAA and the Ulster Farmers Union. It took very little from yourselves in terms of driving that out. They were the drivers. Programmes like that certainly do work. And also just want to mention the likes of the work of the community places, all of these you mentioned. But my main point is, and everybody's mentioned before, but I just want to go back to obviously the issue of the jobs. Clearly we're talking about a third of the workforce here going by the first staff. I mean, are we saying you come up with that and it costs itself a figure and you say, right, this is or did you look into what departments? Because it seems to me, you need to be looking at what you can deliver. It's all about the service you're going to be able to deliver. Types of jobs. Is it partly the NGOs type support type thing? Is that right across the board? Or can you give me any more detail on the types of jobs we're looking at here?
Well, at the moment, it's all, well, subject to the point I made about exceptions, which will be confirmed later this month. But subject to that, it's all jobs. You know, we're not initially having any restrictions. And I mean, the general approach to this across the civil service is that, you know, the general approach will be everybody within certain grade bands will be eligible to apply under this scheme, regardless of where they work, what they do, what their grades are within parameters. They'll be eligible to apply for the scheme. Okay.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
Leo. The key point is the delivery of the service after all this.
Yes, that's the point.
And the point I'm trying to make is we got a figure here of 500 jobs.
Yeah.
There was some pre-thought into that, and just trying to identify
Well,
whether it's a key of cost.
It's cost. It was a cost
There
calculation.
had been some thought into what type of service was going to be done.
Well, it will obviously, if, and I would suggest it's a big if we got towards that sort of figure, we would be obviously have to look fundamentally at the way we do things and how we're doing things. But again, it'll be difficult to get into that level of detail until we know, A, who has applied to exit under the voluntary scheme, and then B, who is allowed to exit under the voluntary scheme, because the two things won't always be the same, or might not be the same. And it's only really when we start to, you know, see individual names, and that will start to happen hopefully from April onwards, although people won't start to leave until September. At that point, fairly early on in the year, we'll be able to see, as it were, where the gaps will be in the organisation and what we need to do in terms of either do we leave that post unfilled, or do we take someone from another lower priority area and put them into that area. But in a sense, that sort of detail will only be able to be worked through once we begin to get some details on who's leaving.
In general terms, Chair, I think the proposition that, and the presumption that we've worked to in identifying the number of staff that need to leave the department is partly driven by the financial position, but also to move us back to a position where we can engage through partners in the community and voluntary sector and other organisations to help deliver our non-core services to the public. So it's to begin to restore that balance. It means in practice that the core of the department, what remains of the department after those staff leave, will of necessity have to focus on our core statutory functions rather than the discretionary functions. But the objective is to try to begin to restore that balance so that we can work with the community and voluntary sector and other organisations to do things around those core functions of the department.
Just follow on, I mean, because I remember asking the last time with frontline jobs, and it's hard to define within the department what exactly that would be. But then you're well aware of the model we took in terms of planning service that time. It was a very, very difficult exercise.
It was.
And I'm mindful of that. I mean, I'm only going, and the department's brought through the figures, whether I agree with them or not, so but I'm only trying to nail down exactly what we're going to have. Thank you very much for your answer.
Just as a, sorry, Chair.
Yeah. No, go on.
It was just to add the supplementary point, of course, that the announcement has also now been made about the restructuring of departments, which of course means that this department will be, to use the terminology, dissolved, and its functions will go to 3 other departments. From the plan is, and it's still subject to, of course, consideration by the Assembly and approval by the Assembly, but the plan is that that would happen May 16. So also from the second half of this year onwards, there'll be other considerations begin to play in as to how we're redeploying our workforce in the department.
But that, if I can come back to your point, Ian, you know, that now a lot of the work you're looking to the voluntary sector to take over from the department. You're only going to do the core tasks. But if you're going to cut with this budget the whole raft almost of the voluntary and community sector, they're all going to go to the wash. You're not going to find them.
And that's exactly, the Minister is very conscious of that,
Yes.
and that's why he wants to spend time, and he is spending time to think very carefully about how he deploys the 1.4 million and also the carrier bag levy funding, because there we have around about 3.5 million that can be deployed to support core critical activities by those external organisations, and those are exactly the issues that he's trying to get the grips with.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just a couple of points here. First of all, I suppose a wee bit of clarification on the carrier bag levy, the 4.2 million, and you've highlighted, or shall we say, the net 4.2 million.
Yeah.
And you've highlighted, particularly in 2014-15, sort of range of where that funding went, and that.
Yeah.
And those causes, as with the areas in Table 7, are all, I don't think anybody would suggest that they aren't sort of good causes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, though, any, or to what extent, do you see moving forward, in light of the pressures that are on what might describe as the Table 7 figures, is there going to be a level of calibration of where the 4.2 million goes? And is some of that money, now, I appreciate it's got to be something that would be directly relevant. I should say, sorry, shouldn't be Table 7, Table 10, I suppose, in that regard. The gap bit. Obviously, for example, whereas, and I'd agree with the earlier comments in terms of the road safety, both in terms of, I think, the priority that needs to be given, but also I think that there is both an opportunity and a driver, if you like, to look for, are we actually, whatever we're spending on the road safety, making sure that it's spent maybe in a better, changing way on it, because I think the people's habits are changing, particularly if a lot of targets are young drivers. Yes, there's a reasonable enough case that you start shifting some of that about towards social media, but let's leave that aside. In terms of recalibration, there's clearly some of the elements within the Table 10 that are very directly related to very environmental type projects. Whatever. I'm just wondering to what extent there's going to be a certain level of recalibration of some of that 4.2 million shifted away from the current projects to some of the subject matters that would be contained in Table 10.
Yep. That's just to confirm, that's exactly the exercise we're engaged in at the moment. The Ministers, as I said, we're a sort of three-dimensional grid where we're identifying these areas, the very limited, how we could allocate the very limited amount of resource still that's available, but then looking at how we're currently spending the carrier bag levy money and how that could best be used.
Yeah, would that be something, I know you've mentioned obviously the chair of potentially coming back next week and potentially on the basis of much more closer to a final position in that regard. I mean, maybe that's too short term, but would that be some of the stuff that would be factored into the final position in that basis? Yes,
exactly what's happening.
Okay, that's the first question. Second, but just on the basis of on the rich support grant side of it. Now, I suppose where there's a slight danger of conflating two issues, certainly there's been indication that transfers are cost neutral. This isn't a transfer issue, and in one sense, if there was going to be cuts to the de-rating grant, whether you had 11 councils or whether you had 26 councils, it would basically be the same problem in that regard. The overall spend, and I appreciate the point to some extent, is there's a disproportionate impact on different councils. The overall spend by councils, what is the figure? Is it about 600 million or is it a higher figure? What's the figure? Just ballpark.
Just under 500 million. It will increase to around about 550 million when the DSD functions.
Okay, so we're looking at next year's budget being around about 550 million, which means that the average impact on a council, and I appreciate that, in terms of the change as opposed to what the overall amount of their support grant, it's about half of 1% is basically the overall impact on average per council, but obviously will vary between councils. For Strabane, maybe about 2% roughly overall. In others it will be 0 in that regard. Okay. The only bit I was asking earlier on, I got a little bit confused in terms of whenever we get some of the figures on this. First of all, in terms of the salary reduction side of it, and you're talking about potentially some of this kicking in September, presumably on the basis that you save 6 months of wages, is that basically a half yearly?
Yeah.
Now, the only thing on that is, if you've got 1,480 permanent staff and you've got a wage bill of 60.6 million, that would make an average wage of around about 41 to 42,000 pounds, if my maths are correct in that regard. And therefore, if you're talking about saving, say, 500 jobs, which is a little bit over a third of those, or, you know, if that is one projection on, which would then equate to around about, probably 500 jobs would equate to about 21, 22 million out of that. I'm just wondering then how with 100 that comes to 1.5 million. Would that not be 2.2 million?
Well, I'll ask Siobhan to come in a second. She's a bit closer to the sort of detail than I am. But I mean,
if, on the basis of you're
Can
saying
I-
1.5 million per 100 jobs, then
But-
500 would only save you 7.5, whereas you're talking
Just
about 10 million.
the ballpark figure I carry around in my head is, no doubt it's not accurate, Siobhan will correct me, but basically 30 staff equals £1 million, 30 staff, £1 million, roughly, which is near a £30,000 average salary rather than your 42.
Well, but with respect on it, your overall...
Now, that's the civil service number, but that covers a whole wider range of grades.
Yeah, but sorry,
whereas I suspect our
but in
grades-
terms of actualities,
Yeah,
your spend on salaries is £60.6
yeah,
million. You have 1,480 full-time equivalent staff that make up that 60. Well, on, the 1,480 is on your
yeah.
in relation to that, which presumably is where your salaries come from. That equates to around about 41 or 42,000 pounds per. You know, if you had 1,500 staff and 60 million, that would work out exactly 40,000. So
Yeah.
it is a higher figure than the 30.
Yeah.
And presumably, if you're talking about voluntary exit, it is likely that the people who are most likely to be attracted to voluntary exit, proportionately or disproportionately, going to be some people who are closer to retirement,
Therefore, higher
who will
salaries.
probably be a little bit higher up on the senior. But
Yeah.
the actual overall wage cost of people who are likely to
Yeah.
likely to be a bit on the higher side
Yeah.
than the average in that regard.
Yeah, which would increase the savings.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to?
Yeah, we are working with an estimated 30,000 per head as opposed to the 40 odd that you have calculated purely by dividing, you know, a straight calculation. So if you take roughly in around 33,000 per head for 30 employees, you're in around £1 million.
But if there are 1,480 equivalents and they generate
Yes.
£60 million
Yeah.
bill, is that not actually a little bit over 40,000 a head?
If you do the straight maths, yes.
Yeah.
But
But it'll be a
And
higher.
given the fact that actually the actual amount in a voluntary exit is probably likely to be on the higher side.
Yeah. I mean,
it may be, yeah.
Okay.
Depends on who goes.
I was simply using
No, okay.
a fairly crude average figure that people quote for average across the civil service, which is roughly, to save £1 million, you need to reduce by 30 staff. I mean, that's a very crude assumption of approximately 30,000-ish salary cost.
Oh, okay.
Now, the circumstances in individual departments, including our own, would be different, but what that assumption was based on was a cautious assumption of saying that if in the second half of the year we were able to reduce, for every 100 staff we reduce after September, which is equivalent to 50 over a year, that's where you get your £1.5 million using the £30,000.
Okay, just seems to me the maths are a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's
seems to me at
always-
first face on it, and I
Well,
appreciate you probably done a lot more work than I have. and
No,
really
it's
seems a
just.
little bit out in that
I mean,
sort of-
sometimes when you don't know, we won't know the actual outcome.
The
So
other-
sometimes
the other-
it's easier just to.
I can understand
use
the in-year
guesstimates.
position as well. I understand the situation that in some extent a lot of stuff will go a bit into the melting pot because
Yeah.
it seems likely that the various departments will all
Yeah.
get, in whatever form, reconfigured in 2016. If, however, you were projecting ahead, you've done, if you like, the savings essentially, say roughly speaking, cutting a third, saving
Yeah.
for the in-year period about 10
Yeah.
million. But your gap, I know that you said about the other 3 million in relation to that. But given the fact you're only making half-year savings, surely it would actually be, if we were simply projecting ahead, prudent to cut as much as a third, because that would make an annual average saving of 20 million, where you're looking to create a gap of, there's about 8.3 million in the
Yeah.
Table 10 figures at present. Take on board what you've said in relation to the other 3 million. That would mean effectively you're making cuts within staff of 20 million to effectively cover an overall annual position of 11.3, because it's not just a question
Yeah.
of you're going to save the money for a 6-month period and then presumably reinstate people to do that. You know, it's going to be a question of it would have an on-go effect in that regard.
Our calculations also factored in the then proposed reductions to both the derating grant and the rate support grant. Now, the rate support grant reduction of 15% is still there. So in addition to the figures table 10, we factored in those calculations.
I mean, it does strike me as a potential say degree of overkill that if, I mean, a cut, for instance, across the board, the figure broadly speaking banded about was maybe about 8-9% roughly of the overall public sector, potentially in terms of voluntary redundancy. If you're looking then at a third across that, now to do that, to prop up to make sure that every penny goes back into rate support grant, or indeed every penny goes into a range of worthy causes, but that, and then have some, you'd still have money left over on that basis, still seems to me not particularly prudent in that regard.
Well, I hope it's very there's a vast amount of uncertainty around what's going to happen here in terms of staffing and where the people will go from and all that. The figure work we're presenting at the moment, as I've stressed, doesn't yet make any assumptions about staff savings of any sort. So we're being very careful.
What I'm saying is, if you're looking to take a certain amount of money out, which actually doesn't, in the long run, equate with what you need to put back in, then it seems to be that even the somewhat caveated assumptions that are present don't entirely seem financially to add up on that basis. That's the point I would make.
The assumptions are assumptions.
And also, let's be honest on it. If it's already been considered that in terms of the 8.3 million gap on the table 10 figures, that you're going to at least make a certain level of contribution towards closing that by way of a certain amount of the carrier bag, then that starts to close a bit further again. And what is, I assume that what we're probably going to do is we're probably going to come to some level of, and not in any way trying to prejudge what we're going to hear next week in that regard. You're presumably coming up with a figure that instead of the 9.7 million in table 10, you may well be ultimately looking to spend 5 or 6 million or whatever it happens to be, and then the gap, some of that being plugged by the carrier bag and some by some level of savings then through voluntary or voluntary exit.
Yeah, that's a fair overview of where we're at.
I look forward if we see the more detailed figures, and I appreciate, to be fair, you've come along with what is a current snapshot rather than sort of defining it. Okay, Chair.
Yeah, I just wonder, is it premature for the department to be thinking about cutting so many staff, given that it's going to be restructuring of the whole department, going to various departments, that the other departments may be able to absorb the staff, over the next few years rather than now. I know you are faced with a huge amount to have to reduce, but suddenly reducing those staff this year, or aiming to reduce those staff in this year, is just a bit premature. As many of them could be absorbed by other departments from 2016.
Yeah, I suppose it depends on the scenario I've presented. If that's, you could say, let this be the new reality. We'll stop funding. We'll stop doing all this grant work, and we'll simply cut all that out of our programmes. Or our future department will cut all that out of their programmes. Then you would have to reduce by fewer staff, obviously. But as I'm afraid I'm sounding like a broken record. I mean, to some extent, the picture and all this will only begin to emerge as the year progresses, and only then will be in a. What I'm bringing to you this morning is the assumption where we're at, the money we've got, with money we know we have, and the sensible assumptions we can make. We're not making any assumptions about vast numbers of staff leaving yet. We'll wait and see what happens, and then adjust as the year moves on. Yeah.
Okay, Alban?
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation this morning. This is pretty brutal, isn't it?
Well, it's challenging, I suppose, is the
It's a very nice
phrase to use.
service response. It's challenging. I would say it's brutal.
Yeah, okay.
Very brutal. And can I ask you, the net reduction to the department, is it 10% or 15%?
It's just under 15%, isn't it? 14.9%.
No, the net percent is 10.7. Net percent is 10.7.
Sorry, net is 10%.
Yep. 10.7.
10%.
Yep.
What's that like in comparison with other departments?
I think it's at the upper end. I think
It's the highest
it's the
now.
highest net.
It's the highest.
Yeah, and
Up a league.
So
there's, I think the
you'd be
AFP 's quite
forgiven.
good.
It's the highest.
You'd be forgiven if you thought you were being victimised.
I was one of the top of the team. Well done.
Well, I mean, it's,
Top of the league.
well, no, I mean, at the end of the day, decisions are made in the
You see, my
play out.
my colleagues around the table are putting forward all sorts of propositions. You don't really need this, program on television in relation to road traffic accident. You would cut that out, and you don't really need to give grants to these organisations, and you don't really need staff to run this department. And if you get rid of the staff, then you get more money, isn't that it? That's the proposition that's being put about. But in essence,
No, it's an unfair derivation of what's being said.
it's certainly not unfair at all. It's an accurate description of what colleagues are putting forward now, and they can respond to this later. But anyway, the reality is that your department is losing, or could lose, up to 500 staff members. How can you run a department with that sort of massive loss? As the chair has already referred to, this is scary stuff. How can you run a department on that basis?
Yeah. Well, I mean, as the minister, he stated, and in his communications with your chair has highlighted the very. I mean, he's called into question when he talks about the viability of the department. What he is talking about is the capacity of the department to continue to do broadly the range of things we do at the moment.
Yes.
Because you get to a tipping point in terms of being able to continue to do what you're doing.
So it depends really where that tipping point is, and nobody knows where that tipping point is.
Yeah.
You know. But certainly there is that danger of getting to the tipping point where the department really isn't as effective as it really should be.
Yeah, we discussed this in November. I mean, when you look at it, there are certain things we really need to do because there are statutory activities. For example, at a very simple level, well, most of the planning functions transferring out to local government, but we'll continue to have to decide certain planning applications. There's various fee activities we do. We have to continue to issue driving licenses, have to continue to do lots of other things. So you have to cover your bases first of all, and ensure those functions and services are continuing. Then you get into move into discretionary, not highly desirable, but discretionary. To take an extreme example, we don't have to spend any money on road safety, for example.
Yes.
But obviously that's a clear priority. It's a discretionary, but it's a high priority, and therefore you begin to move down your priorities.
Yeah, I could think of the public reaction if you decided you're not going to do anything on road safety.
Yeah,
and it'd be a huge reaction, I think.
Yeah.
In relation to voluntary organisations, certainly they're going to be hit, and badly hit, if you don't have the dough to give them in terms of grants. But also, leaving aside the adverse impact on councils in relation to the support grant, it also means that councils are also going to be constrained in terms of assisting voluntary groups, etc., because they will not have that extra money that they would need in order to give to voluntary groups. Isn't that a position as well? So it's a double whammy as far as voluntary groups are concerned.
Could be, yeah.
Okay, I think that's.
Yeah,
I think
I
that's
agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Lord Morrow?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Chair, I think this debate seems to be moving from a voluntary redundancy to a compulsory redundancy. The Permanent Secretary has made it quite clear this is a voluntary redundancy scheme. There's no one going to get tapped on the shoulder on Friday and say, by the way, don't you come back on Monday, we don't need you anymore. It's not going that way. And Alban, Albert has a good choice of words here. He's doing very well. He talked about it's a brutal process. Well, Alban, and I'm sorry to address you, it's not a brutal process because it's a voluntary process. But if I could ask a few questions in relation to the and I know this has been tossed around a bit here today, the 73.8 million in forecast spend for 2014-15, and then the inescapable at 15-16, that's showing a reduction of about 13 million. In that 73.6 million is the, and you've said, I think, Mr. O'Reilly, that the redundancies will not kick in until September of this year. Then, from September to the end of March, is that 73.6 million? Is there a figure still to come out of that as a result of? And I know you can't be dead accurate and say, well, look, there's going to be 600 people, 200, 100, or 50, whatever the case might be, will be leaving. But is that figure included then?
Okay. It's 73.
Sorry, Lord Morrow, can I just stop you? That we've just been told someone's got their mobile on and your bit is not being recorded. Can everyone please check your mobile? It's being handsetted for this session. I know I left my mobile in my office. Not me. Everybody check?
We're going to save money by removing DOE officials their mobiles.
See you in
court. To the final plan, actually.
Introduce quills.
Much underrated.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to Lord Morris.
Sorry, Lord Morrow.
Just ask
sorry, now we're rushing for time now. Yes.
To explain the difference between the 73.6 and the 60.6 in terms of salaries.
The 73.6 is the forecast spend for 14-15, the current financial year we're in. That includes all of the staff in the department at present. So it doesn't include
so
anything.
Potential redundancies that come after that, there's not in that figure.
No.
So that figure could well be, well, it could be any figure. It could be, for instance, it could be 65.6 million.
Sorry,
that is too high, but it's going to come down, isn't it?
The 73 is because it goes down because the planners, 400 planners moving to local council, and on the 1st of April.
Right.
So this is just a natural reduction, or it's nothing to do with the early exit scheme or anything. It's just the department is downsizing because of council, the move for planners to council.
So we're getting there now, Chair. So if you have 100 staff come in and they go out in September, you have that figure then to deduct from that again, isn't that?
Yes. From the 60.6.
Yeah.
So that would not be just as brutal as maybe it is first portrayed here, isn't that right?
I think the
I'm only borrowing a word from Alton.
Well, but the paper does.
I'll be calling an amnesty in a moment.
Our paper, I mean, as I stressed, our paper, the projections, the analysis we're doing does not yet assume any savings arising from staff leaving. But there, as I explained, there are reasons why we have to do it on that basis.
I understand.
But we certainly are optimistic and hope that there will be, and that means that the position will ease during the year.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. You can't presume anything at this stage, not until the real thing comes out.
Not for financial.
But you would clearly have some indication in your head as to what's going on there in your department.
And quite early on in the year.
Yes, and so therefore it's, and then furthermore, you also said that your department is one of the departments that's going to merge with another department. So therefore, even coming back next week, or indeed perhaps next month, it would still be difficult for you to give a true picture of the running costs of the department, because, you know, not to put it too brutal, it's the department's not going to be there anymore.
Yeah.
So there's going to be cost savings there also. In relation to the one that did...
It's not brutality, it's annihilation.
Yeah, right, okay, I'll talk to you after the meeting. And the one that did catch me out here, contracted out services.
Yeah.
Going down from 8.3 to 3.6, about a 56% reduction.
Mm-hmm.
What impact will that have on frontline service?
Again, could I ask the one who went it with the
The majority of
detail beneath this?
of the reduction there is in relation to spend from NIEA on contracted out services such as their contracts with Queen's and the University of Ulster.
Could you tell us a wee bit about that?
It includes a range of services from delivering archaeological support work through to particular studies on particular species, including raptors. So it's a whole range of contracts for specific purposes related both to the built environment and the natural environment.
Birds. Thank you. In relation to the local government, I mean, the 11 councils, the idea of the 11 councils is based on the presumption that this is going to be, there's going to be considerable savings here. After all, that is why the whole thing is happening, right? Will and does the fact now that we are going to have 11 councils in April instead of 26 mean that there will be resources owned by those three? Well, for instance, let's take the one that I know best, Dungannon, Cookstown and Magherafelt. Will they be able to dispose of property, etc., that may be owned by those three councils, which is now surplus to requirements, to put it? Maybe that's not the proper way to put it, but it's the best words I can find at the moment to raise revenue.
Potentially, yes, that could happen.
So
It would be.
That could then go maybe in some way offset the grant to local government, would it? The support grant.
Potentially,
the
yes.
support grant is not going to be as big, I suspect.
That's right. Although it will still be an overall net reduction in the income of each of the councils who will receive the rate support grant, and that council will then have to balance that out with all of the other pressures that the council faces in the coming budgetary year.
And Chair, finally, so are we saying then, and just to go back across the really it'll be perhaps this time next year or beyond before you will be able to give a final picture of the financial forecast for your.
It's going to be ongoing throughout the year, particularly as information begins to crystallise around the staff exits and potential savings. Because whilst staff won't actually start to leave physically until September onwards, we hope that from April, May onwards, we begin to get an idea of who is leaving, so that at that point we can then begin to say, well, that means we will now have extra money to allocate. So at that point, we could take a decision to actually start spending money on the basis that someone is definitely going to leave.
At the outset of your presentation, Mr. O'Reilly, you did say that you did not know, you couldn't be sure, and that would be a fair point, you couldn't be absolutely sure of to what degree there was going to be an uptake on the redundancy programme.
Yeah.
However, you did say then, if I hope I'm not misquoting you, but tell me if you are, and you undoubtedly will. You did, as you in reply to another answer, said you were confident you were going to get the numbers of redundancies. Or did you say that?
No,
you didn't.
I thought you did. That's right. I may have said it, but didn't.
It wasn't your intention.
No, I didn't. What?
Because I thought there was a contradiction, you said at some stage.
I mean, we
and I'm not trying to misquote you, I'm not trying to do.
What would I say in relation to what are our thoughts at the moment on, say, a simple question: how many people do we think will leave the department?
Yes.
And therefore, how much extra money will you have to spend next year once they start to leave?
And didn't you talk about a third or something, a reduction?
No, I think it was some members were quoting the third. I mean, that's why I was quoting the
figures was there
slightly high-level figure of the 100 staff.
500,
I mean, if 100 for every 100 staff that leave, it'll be
1.5 million.
Well, better be careful.
Yes.
It'll be a bit more than that, won't it?
For every 100 staff, it'll be 3 million.
3 million.
So for 6 months of 15-16, it's 1.5 million.
On
average.
Except that's working again on the assumption of 30,000.
On average,
yes.
yes.
So
seems to be
what I was trying to say that if you begin to think, well, will it be 100? If it was 100, it would be 1.5. If it was 200, the numbers begin to mount up in terms of additional money we could allocate.
Yes, it'll run on past the 1.5 million. So
Oh yes, if it goes beyond.
And I'm not,
Yes.
because, I mean, as Siobhan has said here, now, you're talking, Siobhan, here about £3 million.
For
And
full
is that-
year.
Yes, yes, I understand that. And that's based,
It's a
I don't
half
know,
year.
are you basing that on 30,000?
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
Mr Weir says 40,000 or 40,000.
Yeah.
I calculated that they're under the desk at 41,000, but anyway, that's by the way. But you're saying it's 30,000.
That's,
But Leo, I want to get back, we could talk about this one all day.
Yeah,
I want to get back to the point that you made.
yeah.
And I genuinely thought, as the debate progressed, that you said you were confident that you would get it now. I'm not trying to be facetious here, but
No, try to
you're
get
saying
confident I
you didn't say
could.
that.
I'm confident that staff will definitely leave the department. What I can't be confident about is the precise number,
Right.
nor the precise savings that will, because in a sense, while we can speculate, the numbers will, in a sense, the numbers will be what the numbers will be, because once someone leaves, we'll know precisely how much we'll save.
I think, Chair, just as well, that there's a slight, because it's a civil service wide scheme, this is where the ambiguity comes in. Numbers might leave another department, in which case we will hopefully transfer people from the Department of Environment into the other department, because they have lost, 1,000 people. But it's not, because that's the group that actually volunteered to leave. So there will have to be a shift of staff around the place, around the whole of the civil service as well. The likelihood of 500 people putting their hand up in a department of 1,500 and saying we're all going to leave is very remote.
Yeah.
But in another
Chair,
department, well, there's considerably more people.
No, that's grand, Chair, but
Yeah,
it is
that's-
very, look at it, we're only going stats we got.
Oh no, I understand. That's
This paper was five, that's where
Yeah.
and you're right. I thought you did say you were confident that the voluntary exit scheme you would make it, but I'm not saying 500, I'm saying you're confident the voluntary scheme. But let's be clear, Chair, the 500 figure is not ours.
No, it's
was
not.
on the
Absolutely,
original
no, it
paper
came from
or
us.
the draft, so
Yeah.
that's all I was going with.
No.
Yeah. And you're short of 10 million, is that right? A cut of 10%, you're short of 10 million for next year.
What you're short of depends on how much you'd like to put back in again.
Yeah.
You know
But
what I
if
mean?
compared with last year's figure, if you're
Compared to last
still
year.
funding all the voluntary organisations,
Yes.
you're short of about 10 million.
If we
Yeah.
wanted to go back to broadly what we're doing this year, yes, that's the figure.
And I think, sorry, Chair, as well, that the county officer has to take account of the very difficult situation where it's only a one-year budget.
Yeah.
We have to look 2 and 3 years down the line and what the economic position looks like, and there's no projection of growth, so there's a projection possibly of further reductions that might come in subsequent budgets.
Yeah. But Leo, are you saying there is leeway and the minister's looking at it, at the spend for carrier bags, 4.2
Yeah.
million? There could be some discretion in there so that you can fund other voluntary organisations.
Yeah, that's what we're working on at the moment.
Yeah.
How to
Just
use-
I was looking at that table now. You have about 7 or 8 streams under the carrier bag money.
Table
Is that
11,
right?
page
Right.
9.
Okay.
Table 11, page 9.
The challenge fund and all
Yes.
those could be cut
Yeah,
so that you can spread out and fund some of the other organisations.
yes. That's
That maybe is the only way you can do it.
Chair, that's the exercise we're doing at the moment.
Yes, yes. Ian Main mentioned something last week about, and you have listed here, that's the professional course. Let me see, where is it? He's talking about a license, medical, yes, professional course includes driver licensing applicants' medical course, 1.9 million pounds.
Yep.
He said, we should be thinking about doing away with that. Is that going to be a long process? You can suddenly cut that?
It would require legislation, and it
It
would
would.
require full consultation, and it would certainly take us out of line with the rest of the UK, where those medical costs are covered as part of the licence renewal process. Our medical costs proportionally are higher than other parts of the UK because we have a different system to provide the medical advice required to make a judgment as to whether the licence can be renewed. So there are a number of issues in there, but it is potentially of the areas that the Department and the Minister would wish to consider with the committee for the future.
Just on that point, is that not also, the other thing which slightly muddies that a wee bit, is that not one of the main justifications is given why the licences are massively higher than from a cost point of view? I mean,
it is.
I see on the figures on it, you're, albeit coming from different licensing, but the various vehicle income, which I don't know if that relates then to the largely licensing, you've got about 10.4 million. Now, to some extent, I would have thought, you know, there's an argument about what changes you make in terms of the cost on the medical side of it. To some extent, if you cut back on the cost and that make people pay for or whatever on that side of it, I thought that there might be a reasonable argument, but you may have to then effectively pass on that saving effectively to the consumer in terms of those who are maybe getting charged roughly at times twice what they're getting charged elsewhere in terms of license.
Another major driver of the cost differential is the sheer scale. Economies of scale, that's the word I'm looking for. I mean, in Britain, the centre in Swansea is issuing licences for 50 million people, whereas we're doing it for a small.
I suppose, to be fair, in terms of licences, we could get everything simply just done in Swansea of the same type of thing, and that might save a few quid as well.
Yeah. The other thing I just highlight to the committee is at Table 4, of course, we're earmarking £3.5 million capital investment in a new driver licensing replacement IT system, and that's designed to cut our intention is that investment at Table 4, shown there, 3.5 million, is intended to secure significant savings in terms of the number of staff we have to use to run that system. So, but it's just the timing of the investment is still happening.
Okay, Peter.
Yep.
And just want to welcome children here. Which school are you from? Oh, lovely. Okay, we are talking about departmental budgets. These are senior staff from the department telling us how much money they have to save for the budget for next year. So very serious stuff. Yes, yes. Are you a eco school?
All schools are now eco schools. Everyone. All schools are now eco schools.
No, I thought 98%. No?
But we're now up to 100%.
100%. Fantastic. Well done. Well done to you all. Yes, yes. Oh, right. Okay. Oh, excellent. Yes, yes. All very important people.
Maybe you should be sitting here and you should be sitting there.
Absolutely. You could tell me.
Very good. Very good. Well, thank you for coming to see us. Yes. No more questions, members. Members, would you like the department to come back next week? Just maybe very briefly, for example, to tell us about the staff, position, and also to tell us whether there's going to be any leeway through the carrier bag fund, or even send us a paper or something to update us.
Chair, I was just going to say it may be useful certainly to have them back, but I think on the basis of once it's clear what decisions are proposed. To be fair, there's no point in bringing. If somebody's saying we're still discussing this with Minister and we need a bit more time, whatever. Well, I mean, if it's clear that there's more information.
Fair enough.
What I suggest, with your agreement, is what I think would be useful for the committee is we won't give you another 12 pages, but simply if we take the material in Table 10 and the material in Table 11 and show how that money has been split up amongst it, because I think that's the main area of concern at the moment.
Knows how brutal it is. Don't make any decisions on Friday the 13th.
Yeah. Well, when do you think you're clearer and you can come back to us?
We will be able to tell your staff by Friday at latest this week. That's tomorrow. Yeah. Can I just go back and I need to.
You want to check the data to make sure it's 100% correct?
Any consolation, we've all been there.
Yeah. I just need to check with the Minister to see what timescales he would feel comfortable with.
Sure. Sure. Okay. I mean, I'm also really a bit sceptical about your table 7 about the inescapable spend for 15, 16. You're paring down 20 million, more than 20 million from your current spend. How realistic is that too?
But I remember, as we've said already, Chair, that includes the salaries of the people moving out to local government. So it's not, those costs have gone from the department from April onwards, so it's not as bad as it looks.
No.
Chair, it's not as brutal as you
Slightly brutal.
Total annihilation.
Well, it is brutal. Whether you call it challenging or brutal, they're both. Okay, well, thank you very much for spending so much time. So,
thank you.
So we'll talk to you soon.
Top of the league.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Right, members, then we are back to then, where are we now? So, members, we're just quickly moving on then. Next item is item 2. That's a road traffic amendment bill. We also have a letter from the department, and that's a tabled paper. What page is that? Anyway, Sheila will find out. So, members, at our meeting on the page 22 in your pack, and that's from the department. At our meeting on the 22nd of January, we completed the formal close-by-close consideration of the road traffic amendment bill, and the department has now. So we have certainly sought to conclude committee stage early to accommodate the department's timetable. Although we still have 7 weeks before the end of March. We're scheduled to finish the scrutiny stage by the end of March, but we now, we thought we could finish, like this week. But as you all know, as we talked earlier, with Eilish, there are still quite a bit of uncertainties about new amendments going to be brought forward by the department. I suggest that we wait for a couple of weeks. So what we can do is we agree the schedules as drafted, make our own report. Is this one? No, we're going to. We really want to wait. What we want is to wait for the department's amendments in order to complete our decision-making process in full possession of the facts and to make a complete and relevant report to the Assembly. So what we want to do is tell the department then they need to bring the texts of the amendments to us for us to have a look before we actually formally conclude the scrutiny process and produce our report, rather than just doing it blind and say, fine, you can go and do it.
Great,
members agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So members, you agree that we defer the draft report today?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then apologies we have from Barry McAduff.
Yeah.
Okay. Then chairperson's business.
Ian McRae as well.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Ian McRae. Thank you. Item 4 is chairperson's business at page 24, members. Just to refer members to correspondence on page 25, which is an invitation for me to speak at a CAS seminar on planning shoreline marine and landscape on Wednesday the 15th of April. Members, are you content for me to go?
Great.
This is our own, seminar organised by our research department.
Okay. Great.
Okay, members, and then just to note then on page 28, the chairperson's liaison group meeting on the 20th of January 2015. Okay, members.
Great.
And the I'll remind you that we agreed to hold a follow-up meeting with Renew following our visit to Metabolon. And then, so we have arranged now an informal lunchtime meeting for Tuesday the 24th of February at 12:45. A room still to be confirmed. Is that?
Yeah, I think it might be in the
Oh, right, okay, all right, room 370. Room 70. Will be quite a lot of people coming, people from Renew, from Queen's and the Belfast City councillors, as well as NIEA, a number of staff from there, like Chris Mill, who wrote the report on the Moboy site. So, members, if you can tell us now whether you're available to come, or staff can send around another email and you can respond then. Just appreciate you may not have your diary at the moment. Yeah. Okay. Then minutes, members, you content to agree the minutes?
Right.
At page 31. So matters arising, it's at page 37. There's a couple of note there, members, and really for you to note, members, at page 38. Referred you to item 6.5 there on page 46. At our last meeting, we considered correspondence from the ETI committee seeking our views as part of the inquiry into growing the economy and creating jobs with lower corporation tax powers. So that's the inquiry. Last week, I think I suggested planning policy and practices, subsidies for renewable energy, environmental quality and recycling environmental practices. So members, any other issues you think we should put in? Sheila will write to the ETI committee. They have a list of, given to us access to various stuff. People content? We add those extra issues to them? Okay. Then, so members, should you content to note then all the other items? Okay.
Yeah.
Then, just to confirm too, then the proposed visit to Scotland, to the Scottish Environment Week on the 18th and the 19th of February. We agreed that at last week's meeting. 3 members have now indicated that they will be going on the visit, and arrangements are now being made for meetings with the relevant Scottish representatives. It'll be Ian, myself and Aubin going to Scotland. We also... Sheila's going... Neil is sending, what, 1 or 2 staff to come with us as well?
I think so.
Yes, yeah. So we'll be 5 or 6 of us going there. But obviously new staff will be paying for their own, lodgings and expenses.
You get a detailed report when you get back.
Yes, well, Sunday, absolutely. We'll come back to you. And we'll be having a Chinese New Year dinner. Well, there being Chinese New Year Eve. That is actually, that is the biggest meal for the Chinese population. It's a bit like Christmas Day, Christmas lunch.
What Chinese New Year we're moving into? What's year of what? Sorry, next year.
Year of the Ram. The next day. Yeah, Thursday. Thursday the 19th. So we're going to have a nice. It's called It's called round a year up, So, but that's according to the Chinese calendar. So, yeah.
Enjoy that.
You don't know what you're missing, Peter.
Okay. Those are nice and soft.
Well, yes, Sheila just said we haven't booked the flights. Anyone want to come? I mean, it seems quite a good kind of calendar they have.
Couldn't possibly miss health committee chair, sorry.
Okay. Well, we're going in the afternoon on the Wednesday. We're not going until, the flight's 5 o'clock.
When do you get back, Chair?
We're getting back at 5 o'clock the next day.
Oh, not to them?
So going
thanks very much for the invitation. I'm sure I have to decline it this time.
Right here. No problem. Okay, well, Sunday, we'll make a report back to the committee following that. Okay, members, then next item. We have still a number of issues to go through. Okay, page 52, item 7, consultation on the draft local government domain names regulation 2015. Members, you content? We just ask for synopsis of responses.
Great.
Okay, next item, page 56, item 8, synopsis of responses to consultation on the draft local government reorganisation compensation for loss of employment regulations. At our meeting on the 13th of November, we noted the department's consultation on this and requested a synopsis of responses. The consultation ran from the 10th of November to the 5th of January 2015, and a total of 13 responses were received, and mostly from local councils, NEOGR and different organisations. I just wonder, given members' previous interest, shall we ask for an oral presentation? Members, you content with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then next item, item 9, page 70, and it's an SR. Members, the motor vehicles driving instruction trainee amendment regulation. Members will look at this previously. Previously when? Some time ago. Okay, and the rule is we look at this on the 13th of November, and we will contend for the department to make the rule. Okay, when we look at the SL1 at the time. Members, can I put to you now, the Committee for the Environment has considered SL 2015 number 4, the Motor Vehicles Driving Instruction Trainee Licence Amendment Regulations 2015, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Our members agree?
Great.
Thank you. Next item, item 10, at page 89. That's another SR. That's the Motor Vehicles Driving Instruction. Members, the purpose of the rule is to introduce a facility for disabled drivers to take the driving instruction tests in a car with automatic transmission, and stipulate that if an approved driving instructor passes the test in a vehicle with an automatic transmission, they can only give instruction in a vehicle with automatic transmission. Members will look at the SL1 on the 13th of November 2014, and we were content for the department to make the rule. Okay, members, it's subject to negative resolution, and the examiner has not yet commented on the rule. So if I can put to you now, the Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2015 number 5, the Motor Vehicles Driving Instructions Amendment Regulations NI 2015, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Members agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Item 11, another SR, that's the Motor Vehicles Driving Licenses Amendment Regulations. That's at page 108, members. The purpose of the rule is to amend the Motor Vehicles Driving Licenses Regulations 1996. We look at the SL1 on 4th of December 2014, and we were content for the department to make the rule. The rule is subject to negative resolution procedure and will come into operation on the 23rd of February 2015. The examiner has not yet commented on the rule, and if I can put this to the members now, the Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2015 number 6, the Motor Vehicles Driving Licenses Amendment Regulations NI 2015, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objection to the rule. Our members agree?
Great.
Thank you. And then next item, another SR, that's at page 122. Members, that's the motor vehicles wearing of seat belts. Purpose of the rule is to introduce uniform provisions concerning the approval of enhanced child restraint systems. members, we looked at the SL1 on the 13th of November, and we were content for the department to make the rule subject to affirmative resolution procedure, and will come into operation on the 20th April 2015 if affirmed by the Assembly. The examiner has not yet commented on the rule, and if I can put to the committee now that the Committee for the Environment has considered SR 2015, number 24, the Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seatbelt Amendment Regulations NI 2015, and subject to the report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules, recommends that it is affirmed by the Assembly. Are members agreed?
Chair?
Yes.
I was just going to ask, oh yeah, great. Have we received any briefings on this?
We had.
We had before?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Did we?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, have we not?
No, I don't think so.
I know you asked
briefing?
about cost.
Yes, that's why.
I thought we got a response.
We got a response.
Or we got a written
but I don't
response.
think we've ever had an oral briefing on it.
It might be useful just to have a
Yes.
brief briefing.
Yes, but it's not coming into operation until April.
Anyway.
What number would?
Yeah, we can defer it after.
Okay.
Yes. They did tell us about the cost and said, but
We got a written
Yes,
response
but
to
yes.
questions, but we can get an oral briefing
Yeah,
if you
it would
want.
be useful, Chair.
okay, members content with that? Okay. So next one, members, it's at page 177, item 13, briefing on waste gasification by Fu Circle Power. There is a briefing paper at page 139. And there's a table paper at page 34. Thank you, Sheila.
Chair.
Okay.
Just before you ask the decision, could I declare an interest in that I have family members who are employed by Bombardier?
Okay. Yes, that's fine. If I can welcome Brad Ross, the Managing Director of Fu Circle Power. Nice to see you again. I think you came to talk to me before, didn't you?
We have, yeah.
Yes, yeah. We're a bit rushed for time. If you give us 5-10 minutes presentation, and then members can ask you questions afterwards.
Well, thanks very much to the chairperson and the deputy chair and the committee for giving us this opportunity to present. The project is a culmination of 3 years' hard work from a multidisciplinary team drawn from the aerospace and waste resources sector. Essentially, the project is a construction and operation of a purpose-built waste-to-energy plant developed by a local consortium of Northern Ireland companies. It's an investment by Northern Ireland companies for Northern Ireland's industry and into infrastructure that will benefit Northern Ireland as a whole. It will utilise modular advanced thermal gasification technology. It's a technology that we have specifically chosen so that it'll fit within Northern Ireland's waste management strategies, and specifically will have a focus on recycling and recovery, and not just recovery alone. It'll be a £100 million private investment. It'll be located within an established industrial area, and so will support Bombardier's ongoing global competitiveness. And finally, the project will support Northern Ireland's waste targets by converting at least 120,000 tonnes of RDF into 15 megawatts of electricity. Artist's impression of the proposed facility shows that it fits sensitively into its surrounds within the harbour estate, and it's worth noting the planning application went through with very little, if not any, objections. Where we are right now, we negotiated and secured the site in November 2013. We received full planning permission in January 2014. We appointed our preferred EPC and operator contractor in March 2014. April 2014 saw us complete all the necessaries for our grid connections, which are in place right now. In the last month, we have secured our ROC pre-accreditation. We have also secured our full PPC license, and we are in the process of completing our front-end design. We have a minor amendment to the building design, which is with the Minister right now, and we're expecting a response from that within the next 30 days. What should happen from now going forward? We will be finalising our funded due diligence within the next 30 days. The banks, along with our equity partners, are well advanced in this, and we don't see this taking longer than another 30 days. We will then finalise all our EPC, equity and funded contracts, which again have been ongoing for the last 3 months. We therefore expect to have equity financial close by the end of March 2015, at which stage we will commence detailed design of the entire project. We then hit one of the key milestones in the project, and one which will define the project going forward, and that is the availability of legislation permitting the extension of the ROC grace period. Only at this point will we be able to bring senior debt funders into the process, and only at this point will we be able to achieve full financial close. Our deadline for this date is July 2015. The construction phase is 24 months, and this will be followed by a further 3 months of commissioning and eventually first power. We therefore expect full operation of the plant by October 2017, a full 5 to 6 months before the ROC deadline of end of March 2018. The feedstock for the plant will be a fully treated waste that is converted into a refuse-derived fuel. During the treatment process, it's important to note that recycling will be maximised. We mentioned previously that the technology was chosen specifically for this purpose. Our intention is to maximise recycling first and then to recover energy. The waste will be sourced from household and commercial industrial sources, and as such, this will provide a solution to Northern Ireland's local authorities and businesses alike. Treatment will occur at suitably localised waste treatment infrastructure facilities that are already in place, and as such we will avoid unnecessary vehicle movements, and waste treatment will not be centred in one area only. This will broaden and enhance employment within the sector, which currently employs over 1,000 people. Key to any EFW project is the availability of waste. A snapshot of Northern Ireland's current waste landscape shows the following. Within the local authorities, there is currently around about 924,000 tonnes of waste produced each year. The balance after recycling, composting and source segregation activities leaves a tonnage of 472,000 tonnes. It's very difficult to assess the exact volume of C&I waste arisings. Commercial businesses have been the first to respond to the calls for resource efficiency, and over the last 10 years, the arisings of waste within the commercial sector have fallen by over 30%. This trend will continue. We have allocated a figure of 125,000 as the tonnage of combustible waste that we believe is within the C&I sector. That leaves a balance of roughly 600,000 tonnes available for waste-to-energy projects within Northern Ireland. Currently, Northern Ireland has provided planning consent for waste-to-energy projects that would require 400,000 tonnes of waste. In addition to this, cement kilns are calling on more and more RDF to be sent to them. We have allocated a prudent figure of 100,000 tonnes for this outlet. That leaves a balance of slightly under 100,000 tonnes of waste available, which we term headroom. This headroom is essential to ensure that all projects remain viable into the future, and that Northern Ireland will also be able to benefit from any technology changes or developments that occur in the future. One of the biggest threats we see facing development into this infrastructure is infrastructure overcapacity. The annual Residual Waste Infrastructure Review, Issue 7, prepared by Eunomia, highlights the very real threat of constrained maximum recycling, which occurs when excess of treatment infrastructure is concentrated within a region. The level of constraint on recycling in England is already at an extreme level, and as a result of this high level of both existing and under construction facilities, England faces the very real threat of having its recycling potential constrained. This will be further. This development will further deteriorate as more and more facilities come online, and there eventually will be a need to put more and more unrecycled feedstock into recovery facilities. Currently, the EU's recycling target is 50% of all municipal waste by 2020. This is indeed a very challenging target in itself. There's a proposal from the European Commission under the Circular Economy Package to increase this target to 70% by 2030. The committee should be aware that thermal infrastructure overcapacity will make these targets unachievable, as maximum recycling rates will become constrained. Our recommendations or observations to the committee: to develop an up-to-date waste infrastructure strategy that recognises existing facilities and potential future private investment, as well as the availability of feedstock to support the infrastructure over this period of time. To provide the sector with clear direction on public procurement, so that investment decisions on essential infrastructure within the waste and energy sectors can be made. And finally, support the progression of the ROC grace period legislation timeously through Northern Ireland. That concludes our presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think I got a bit muddled with all your presentations. It certainly is a good thing for Northern Ireland, much needed. So you're saying this is going to take in commercial as well as council ones, which is household. Is that right? Household.
That's correct.
As well.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a number of facilities already in Northern Ireland that are taking commercial waste and household waste and producing RDF, which is being exported.
Yes. Okay. Okay. I mean, commercial waste. What percentages commercial waste compare with household waste? It's almost as big. Is that right?
It's minimal. When we talk about commercial waste, we talk about commercial waste that can be produced into a fuel, and that's probably only around 10%, 10 to 15% of local authority waste arisings.
Okay, okay. And then you're mostly going to work with Bombardier in terms of the commercial waste?
No. Bombardier's involvement is so that we can provide them with a predictable source of energy into the future, upon which they can remain competitive and upon which they can secure or continue to secure their export contracts. So their involvement is primarily to receive a predictable stream of energy into the future.
Okay, okay. So they would only be one of the many commercial entities that may come to you or supply you with waste for energy?
Yes, yeah. I think their waste arisings now have fallen dramatically over the last 5 years. Yeah. At this point in time, I think they only produce about 2,000 tonnes of excess waste each year, which for a company the size of Bombardier is quite remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. And that's to be encouraged. That's what the EU, as you said, will be demanding us in reducing waste, reducing landfill.
Absolutely, and I think that's the point of our presentation, is that it's essential that capacity takes account of that.
Yeah.
The last thing that we want to see is a situation where there's excess capacity.
Yes.
And we are actively encouraging organisations and households to create waste so we can feed infrastructure.
Yeah, defeats the purpose.
It does,
in many ways.
indeed.
Yeah, of reducing, waste. Yeah. Okay, let other members come in. Cal?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. You've waited patiently there to get your slot. Just a couple of questions. In terms of the energy that you want to produce, can you give us some detail in relation to that? And also, how do you ensure that the fuel you're getting is the dry fuel? It's not, that separation between recyclable and the dry fuel, or what's the checks and balances there in terms of making sure that's what's happening? Because I would have concerns, in relation to that.
Right. Well, the energy that we'll be producing will be in the region of 15 megawatts each year. So 15 megawatts per hour each year. It's roughly 100,000 megawatts of energy. About 50% of this will be regarded as renewable. The reason being is that only 50% of RDF is considered to be biomass. In terms of waste quality, the technology is sensitive to the type of fuel we put in. It's a £100 million project. That's secured by an EPC contract, which effectively is a warranty. So they're only going to warranty us, they're only going to ensure the performance of this plant if we put the correct type of fuel in. That fuel has to meet any number of specifications. One of the most important ones is moisture. The other is chlorine content. The other is sulfur content. So there's an absolute requirement that this waste is treated before it goes into this plant. This is not mass burn incineration. It's very, very far from it. Our facility in Garva, therefore, processes waste currently, and we produce fuel which is acceptable within the cement kiln industry. The cement kiln industry uses the highest quality of refuse-derived fuel that you can produce. It's regarded as a grade 1 fuel. There's only 2 companies right now in Northern Ireland that have the capability of producing that. We are hoping that as this project develops, that 2 or 3 other companies within Northern Ireland's waste sector will make the necessary investments so as to produce the quality of fuel that we want. As part and parcel of that whole treatment process, you have to pull out as much recycling as you can. So I can assure the committee that our process will stand up to scrutiny, that we are maximising recycling within the waste sector as far as is possible, given the current pricing constraints that we have right now.
And is that conditioned on your planning application, part of the planning application?
The planning application will specify that a waste code of 1912-10 is accepted into the plant. 1912-10 requires that there is a series of treatment processes that you have to go through to convert from a waste to a fuel. So we are specifically prevented from putting raw waste into this facility.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anne?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ross, for your presentation. You'd mentioned in your presentation infrastructure overcapacity, and I've obviously been very much on the record as with my opposition to the ARC21 proposed incinerator at Mollusk for my own selfish constituency reasons, and on behalf of those 3,000 objectors. Can you tell me you have the full planning application granted now for the project? Could you tell me how many, or do you know how many objections were received to that planning proposal?
As far as I understand, there were no objections received. I think we got 2 letters of support.
Okay. One wasn't me.
You don't have many houses around you anyway where your site is proposed to be.
We located where you would normally expect to find one of these facilities. It's not the cheapest piece of ground, but I think that's a discussion for another day. But it's certainly where these plants are meant to be located.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Can I ask you to then, on the subject of ARC21 and that proposed project, what impact would the ARC21 project, if again planning permission, what impact would that have on your proposal?
Well, I was expecting this question, and I had a pre-planned response to it, which went something like, it's not really for me to comment on the impact, but I would hope that the committee and the DOE and the other organs of government would look at the need for such a facility and would analyse the impact of such a facility on the rest of the economy and the various targets that they need to achieve. Personally, I do not believe that there's a suitable argument for a facility of this scale. But listening to talk of £50 million being available to develop a project in Northern Ireland, a strategic piece of infrastructure, I have to wonder at what the definition of strategic is. If strategic means threatening our recycling targets, if strategic means threatening the livelihood of our project, threatening the potential export capacity of one of our biggest employers, well then I think ARC21 is perfectly suited. But I don't believe it is. I think that that money can be used for projects which either create employment or create further exports, or at the very least significantly improve our capabilities to recycle.
So there's definitely the threat of overcapacity.
I think absolutely. I think Northern Ireland is far too small to have too many of these projects.
Okay, and you'd mentioned waste recycling targets. How much do you think your project will contribute to meeting those targets?
The type of waste that we traditionally deal with, we believe we are virtually maximizing recycling, the recycling limits on that waste at this point in time. The benefits of this project are that we will facilitate more household waste to be treated. So currently there is close on 400,000 tonnes of household waste locally, local authority collected household waste that goes straight to landfill. It doesn't go through any treatment process. We believe that there's at least 10% additional recycling capability within that waste. So as a very bare minimum, there's another 40 to 45,000 tonnes of recycling that can be derived just by treating that waste instead of sending it direct to landfill. And this facility obviously allows for a recovery outlet for the treated waste.
Interesting, thank you. And I haven't any more questions for you, just to thank you for clarifying that actually you would be taking in household waste, because every time I have a conversation with anybody anywhere, they keep saying, oh, but that's only for industrial waste. They can't deal with the household waste. So it's good to hear clarified that that you can deal with both. Thank you.
And you intend to do that? Because I think the confusion was when Bombardier coming out saying that they are going to use this facility, and then a lot of people had that in their mind. That was my early perception, that it's only, you're there only to surface Bombardier, but it's not.
No, not at all. Waste is waste.
Yeah.
We don't. We treat all waste equally.
Take it from
That's a very good answer. Yeah. Then I have Ian Millen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on some of the stuff that has already been said, how many councils would you need to have contributing in order to keep the plant going on a regular basis?
Well, it really depends on how many other projects become developed. I think if the projects that have currently received planning consent are all are being constructed, then all of Northern Ireland's local authorities will need to be feeding into just the projects, the private sector projects that have received planning consent. So it's very difficult to answer that at this point in time, but needless to say, there is recovery outlets, including ours, and including the ones that have received planning consent, to satisfy all of Northern Ireland's local authority requirements.
But if a large number of councils don't buy in, does that present problems for yourself?
It will present a certain amount of problems, but we have been successful in attracting waste for the last 5 years from the Northwest Councils and from the Swamp Councils. And we believe that we'll be competitive and we'll be able to continue attracting waste from those. The worry that we have is that over the next 10 years, waste availability or residual waste will fall, and we will need to be attracting waste from other local authorities within the ARC21 area. It will become a necessity. if other projects are built that already have consent, we will have to compete with them for that waste. So this will become a very, very competitive landscape very, very quickly over the next 10 years, just with the facilities that have planning consent right now, not taking into account any, for instance, that might get planning consent in the future. So we will need to engage with every single local authority from day one.
Okay, and just to ask then, you know, if you're going to be filtering the materials that come into you, then why, if you're filtering them, you can't have 100%, take out the 100% of the recyclable stuff?
Well, we can. We have certain limitations. For instance, plastic. There is we are prohibited from exporting plastic from domestic waste to some of the big users like China. So we have to rely on existing outlets, for instance, in continental Europe and in mainland UK. And the drive right now is towards very, very high quality recyclates. So there's currently a crisis, for instance, in mixed paper. The quality of mixed paper is traditionally very low because it's picked from a co-mingled source like household waste, and it's very, very difficult to move that material. We are doing it, but we do it more than often at a loss. So that's why I sort of put a caveat on that. You know, it's a balance between what ratepayers can afford to pay and what the market will allow you to pay. And right now, I think we are, you know, we have pushed that envelope.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Okay. And maybe you have said it, maybe I missed it. What would be the majority of what types of material, of site, of waste you will be using mostly?
It will be household waste.
Would be
household waste. So at least 70% of the feedstock that we will use to produce our RDF will probably come from local authority household waste.
So what would that be? Those would be paper.
Black bin waste.
Black bin waste,
yeah.
Actually, okay.
So black bin waste will come into our facility along with commercial and industrial waste from the likes of Bombardier and various other commercial operations.
Okay, and this is using really high temperature, is that right? To turn them, it's not burning it or
no. What gasification focuses on is heating up the waste, if you want, for want of a better word, grilling the waste without allowing combustion. So you exclude oxygen from the whole system, so that combustion of the actual waste does not occur. What happens is the gas is released and the gas is taken into a secondary chamber. Okay. The gas is then cleaned, and only at that point is the gas combusted. Right. So you're almost producing if you want to call it a renewable gas, which we call syngas.
Okay. And that's for electricity, is that right?
Yeah, it then goes through a thermal process. So much like any other waste-to-energy plant, we then go through a boiler. The boiler creates steam, and the steam drives a turbine.
Okay. Okay. Great. No more questions? Is everyone happy? Well, thank you very much for coming, Brad.
Can I ask one question?
Sorry, yeah.
Just in terms of that process, what is your waste after that? What's left?
What's left is your ash, your bottom ash.
Use that for roads, or?
We are in dialogue with a cement factory in the south who are now feel that they're at a point where they can start substituting various other inputs like lime with ash. So it's quite an exciting process. What they've been waiting for is for sufficient tonnage of this material to be produced. So they believe with the current infrastructure at the cement kilns, the current infrastructure at Indavar, at Poolbeg, and now with our project, that there will be enough for them to develop that line.
Thank you.
Separate.
Fine, thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Very interesting, and best of luck. You want to get it all finished before rock changes in 2017? Yeah, yeah. Okay, all the best.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Right, members, then go back then. Now, okay, members, Back down then, next item is correspondence. Page 142, members, you have their correspondence listed. Item 14.1, at page 143 under correspondence, there's a request from NEOGA to brief the committee in June 2015 on the progress to date on local government reform. I think it's a good idea. Would members be content to schedule a meeting in June? Really, a couple of months, a few months after the start of the new councils. Members content? Okay then. Are you content with the suggested actions then on the correspondence cover note for the other items? Okay. Forward work programme is on page 153. Members, any comments? You content to note? Okay, then AOB, any AOBs? No? Okay. The next meeting, members, will be on Thursday week. That's the 12th of February. No, sorry. No, it's next. Is it? Yes. All right, correct. Thursday week.
You're not over to Scotland yet,
Next week, Jessica.
Yep, in the Senate chamber, 12th of February, Parliament building, and then we don't need to go.
No, we don't. No, we're finished now.
Yeah, we'll finish then. Yep. So that's really it then. So we'll just adjourn the meeting. Members, that's us. Yep.